Ian doesn't tell you that. Like I had to tell you the one time you were
yeah, I'm glad you did. What's the network here?
It's FIO 744M7 guest.
Okay.
Right? And then the password is Flash Family 163.
Then he said something about somebody coming here to cut the grass.
Yeah.
Radio 94.3 Reggae Dance Hall Soca Hip-hop and R&B African Disco Oldies but goodies.
Hi, this is Jenny Jackson.
We're bridging the gap. Seriously. Radio 94.3 New Jersey.
Good morning, handsome.
Good morning, sir. How you doing, man?
I'm doing fine. When you start your articles, man?
I have the drive ready tomorrow for the first one.
Okay. That's gonna be good when you
Hi,
get
this
up
is
there.
McGooman Moving. Box truck for rent for all your light moving needs. Anywhere within the Northeast Orange, Irvington Orange areas. $50 a trip from Monday through Thursday. $60 from Friday through Sunday. Call 862-279-9300. That's 862-279-9300.
Oliver Samuels here, and I just want to invite you to come out to the People Profile Awards Sunday, June 18, 2017 at the Bailey Hall, right up there in Fort Lauderdale. Guess what? Me will be the recipient of the prestigious Lifetime Awards. Don't take out one syllable of the meaning of the word prestigious. It's a black tie affair. Nothing less. Yellow Man get it last year, and that is a great achievement. Now me gonna be the recipient. I'm taking it to another level.
Jenkins Entertainment in association with H&M proudly present Mother's Day Dinner and Concert, a tribute to all mothers. On the 14th of May, the club gonna be Club Eclipse. That's 247 Fabian Place, Newark, New Jersey. Y'all know what that is. Performing live is your host, Ghost Rider, your soul provider. I'm the big man himself, my daddy, Ken Booth. So all them ladies, them dainty babies, just come out early and support your mommy. Bring out your mommy. And all of them rude boys, bring out your mommy. Remember, admission is only parts at the gate mall. So remember, music provided by Unity, DJ Prento, DJ Jason, DJ Hurl, MC Gren, and Lady D. So remember, come out early, New Jersey, to all of my ladies, my dainty babies. Take your mom to England. It's a special night from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's Mama special night. Love you, Mama. Club Eclipse, 14th of May, Mother's Day. Wow, Ghost can do. No.
Know what I am doing? Downloading the Western Union app. I need to send money to my auntie in Nigeria. Know what I am doing now? Checking today's exchange rate to Nigeria on the Western Union app. Now, I'm sending my auntie money to help her with her groceries.
Download the Western Union app today. Use it to check today's exchange rate and send money to loved ones in Nigeria. Western Union, moving money for better.
Western Union makes money from currency exchange. Carefully compare fees and exchange rates, which may vary and are subject to change. NMLS number 906983.
For the most authentic Caribbean food in town, check out Sunsplash Caribbean Bakery and Restaurant. They got the natural organic juice bar that'll get your day started right. Like a power punch, the Vegan juice, the Mega Green. Roots like the immortal and the resurrection. And peep this, they have an extended bakery department that whips up my favorite, the hot hardo breads. White or wheat, that's your choice.
If you're feeling hungry, just grab a bite.
A case, 24 case of those waters. It's good water, bro. They done. I got them Friday. They been going yesterday.
I mean, that's some of the best water I've had, man. It really, you know.
Serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They also cater to vegans and vegetarians with the item stew and the item the soul jerk salmon and mango tilapia. And of course, they got the usual curry goat, oxtail, brown stew chicken, jerk chicken, and so much more. I mean, their menu is extended and they're highly rated. Your best bet is to just stop by or give them a call. They're open Monday through Wednesday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Thursday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Sundays, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. They're located at 56 Main Street in Orange, New Jersey, and can be reached at 973-395-3777.
These days are no hungry days. We need some more food up on we empty plate. Long time we there and we sit on a wait. Sunsplash restaurant I run the place. Everybody me say just want a taste, yeah.
Let your food be a medicine. Eat well, live longer. I'm David Shepard and I endorse this commercial. You wanna answer that, don't you? I bet it's killing you, seeing that soft glow just inches away. Hey, someone wants to tell you something, or maybe ask you something. Ah, come on, answer it already. Just so we're clear, that wasn't my fault. Next time, ignore your inner thoughts. Don't text and drive. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Council and your friends here at Splash Radio.
Splash Radio 94.3 New Jersey Rich.
Well, I don't know, Mr. J represent for 94.3 FM Splash Radio. We'll splash out the music on them.
Initialize sequence now.
We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good.
Him. Your attention, please. This is no ordinary show. Covering news and information for Essex County, New Jersey, and beyond. This is the Eric Dawson Radio Show. Broadcasting from 94.3 Splash Radio. Now, here's your host, giving it to you like only he can. It's Eric Dawson.
Hey, good morning. This is Eric Dawson. This is the Eric Dawson Radio Show, 94.3 FM. Call number 973-457-8000. Again, 973-457-8000. If you're listening through your mobile device, 213-493-0287. As always, we're streaming live on Facebook. And I'm here with Kevin Jenkins and former chairman of the Board of Education in Newark, Rashon Hasan. How you guys doing today?
Good morning.
Good morning. I always want to call him Mr. Hasan.
Mr. Hasan.
And that's where I get confused. I'm like, Mr. and
Mr. Hasan.
How you guys doing today, man?
I'm doing fine.
Doing well, brother. Doing well.
No complaints. We're young. Well, you guys are young. I'm old.
Well, I'm going to ask people
I'm sitting
ahead
next
of time
to this fine gentleman over here.
to excuse
I came
my
back on the
sniffling.
show because of this guy. I love you, but I came on the show.
Oh, he's brilliant, man.
I love hearing this guy.
He brings a perspective that I think all people, should be interested in hearing.
Plus, I give up my gym time. You know, those 2 hours, that's my gym time.
Oh,
So
okay.
I come up here because I wonder, this guy's in shape, you know.
Now, where do you go to gym?
I go to New York Sports. Oh, I better not tell you. I might have people watching me at the gym. No, I can't tell you where I go to the gym. No, I go to New York Sports Club.
Okay.
Yeah, I go there. Yeah, I've been there for years when it was Gateway Fitness and now it's New York Sports Club. So I've been going through the Gateway for years. When I worked in New York, I was back and forth, and I just stayed there.
All right.
So it's really nice. They had a new gym, by the way. I think it's Planet Fitness on Broad Street, right by the Newark Housing Authority. It's really nice, man. Really nice.
I think it's good. I think the Planet Fitness brand is for a certain kind
Absolutely.
of individual. You know,
Right.
What kind of individual?
So they have these rules where when you're working out, they kind of want you to be quiet in the gym.
Really?
Yeah. So you know, if one thing
I don't like a lot of grunting. People, I don't know. Yeah.
But you know, I think when you
really,
that's true. So there's a difference. So Planet Fitness is not, in my opinion, is not the kind of gym that someone who's used to going to an Ironman gym should go to.
Yeah.
Because they have this thing called gym intimidation, right? Where they don't want individuals who may just be coming to get themselves back in shape. They don't want individuals to feel intimidated.
Yeah.
When they see other people, like going hard. So one thing that
put on your earphones and put on some sunglasses.
So one thing that drove me crazy. I came in and I had a gallon jug of water. It was about half full though. And when I walked into the Planet Fitness, and I checked in, the woman at the desk told me that I couldn't come in there with that water.
Why?
I was like, what's the problem? She's like, well, we think that it might be a little intimidating for the rest of it. I said, my water?
Water?
Yeah, the fact that it was in a gallon jug.
Oh, I see. Yo,
so it might be intimidating. You might hurt someone.
Like if you went in with this.
No problem.
Because you just went and bought this from the store. Yeah. See, but if you got your gallon jug, man, that means you can really get a workout on.
Yeah.
What the heck are you going to the place with a gallon of water any day?
I plan to be there for a few
hours. Well, see, that's what I'm saying. So now imagine if you came in, Kev.
Oh, no, I don't come in with anything. I try to eat a little banana and drink a smoothie or something, but
I'm just trying to stay
I don't understand.
hydrated.
Yeah, I don't understand why a big jug will be intimidating to a person.
Well,
I didn't understand that either.
Look, size matters, right? So, you put that down, that bottle next to a jug, man. What you say?
Actually, I was going to go do a tour of it. I can't go there anyway. I mean, but I actually am very happy to know we have a top of the line gym downtown Newark. Look, I have a nephew that lives downtown Newark. Mm-hmm. He is living the lifestyle that I always wanted my nephews and my family members to live, to be downtown residents. Mm-hmm. Go shopping at Whole Foods. You can walk up the street to go stop and shop right. You can go to the cleaners. You can go to the library, the museum. You can go have dinner. We need more restaurants, of course, but we have some good restaurants. And it's great to have young people be able to walk up and down the street and do all of the things that they want to do within their neighborhood. So I'm glad that the gym is there. I like that. I was going to do a tour of it. I told him over the weekend, I said, it must be great for you to just walk out your door and get all of these amenities that are available to you. I said, when I was growing up in Newark, I had to go to New York Sports Club, right? There was no gym downtown Newark, so I'm glad these young people are benefiting from it.
Yeah, but, that helps. I think that also helps us make sense of the development conversation and how we transform our neighborhoods and transform our communities. At the end of the day, one thing we all want to see is an improvement in the quality of life. Right. And that means that not only do we need to have individuals who can take care of themselves financially, but you do a great job here on the show on Wednesdays, right? You're talking about the wellness aspect. There's a huge physical component that's associated with that. Also, the mental component. Right. So what I think gyms provide, and this is why that particular, that brand of Planet Fitness does not work for me, because when I go into the gym, that's an opportunity for me to also decompress. Right. So when we talk about these ills that we deal with, whether you're working you're in a competitive work environment, you're in a stressful job, right? We tend to use that as our outlet as well. So when I go in the gym, I want to get on the punching bag for a little while. Because I know I'm out here, I'm dealing with this nonsense. I can't step out of character. And
we just got to put dude in a basement somewhere.
Well, no, actually, he's right. I mean, I agree. I'm into mindfulness. I believe in meditation, right? And mindfulness is a great tool for me because I'm completely insane. I mean, my brain is active all the time. Right. So to take time and breathe and be conscious of your presence, being present is important for me. So I'm a big proponent of meditation and mindfulness. It really helps me. Going to the gym just smooths me right out. So I get that. Consciously, you really want to be in that place because that helps you to deal with all of the toxic, stuff that you have to deal with every day. So I always try to tell my peers, I thought when I was engaging in meditation, when I first, started, I got to tell you, it was painful. The sick stuff that runs through your mind, and but it's okay. It's natural. It's normal. We live in the real world. But I got to tell you, I think it's a great tool for us. And a lot of people are now practicing it in their schools, and a lot of people are practicing it in their personal life, and and it's not something you can do all the time, but to get out of the bed and breathe for 1 minute to 2 minutes to 3 minutes, and you keep practicing it, you become better at it.
Look, it's good to give your body and your mind a checkup.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Well, I'm a hypochondriac. My wife tells me if I see anything on TV, I got it. So I know, but that's the way I've been all my life, and I try to stay in some physical shape and try to stay in some mental shape, and try to be as open to that kind of, different kind of methodology of training your mind and breathing and getting closer to God and all of the things I think help us when we get older. I don't know how we live in this world, so, without doing it.
Now let's tie that into our conversation about re-engineering our education system.
Right.
Boom. Here we go.
So as we move forward and we talking about, we have these conversations about educating the whole child. You can't be serious about educating the whole child when you don't have that component of wellness. And not just talking about going to gym class, right, running around playing basketball, but also being able to teach our children how to work out their minds. So I think, there are things that we should now be seeing in that environment in our schools. Yoga, I think, is something we should see without a doubt. We should be teaching our children how to control themselves, because that's a large part of that process, bringing in that calmness of the spirit, teaching them how to, manage their breathing, all of those different things that help you become a well-balanced individual. And we talk about going to the gym to relieve stress as adults. Now let's think about our kids that are in the failing schools and the kind of stress that they deal with. We spent a lot of time over the last few weeks talking about safe passageways. Now, there was a conversation about the student who was suspended because they got caught with a knife. And the student's response was, I carry this weapon because the path that I travel to and from school is a dangerous route. You don't think that's stressful on a kid?
Oh, sure.
Right. Yeah. So what kind of supports are we now providing these children in school to also deal with those issues that they have? Because when they step out of that environment, and let's say the social worker is not present, the teacher's not present, they also need to have presence of mind to be able to deal with those.
But nobody's having that conversation.
And this is a
part during the election, nobody had that conversation about that. No, I didn't hear any of the candidates talk about it. Again, it just seemed to be a campaign of sound.
Well, yeah, but that you and I agree and disagree on that. But that's what campaigns are about, right? So they're going to have 1 or 2 years, they're going to have 1 or 2 years. Either who's on the board now will have an additional year, and the people that join the board have 2 years, I would imagine, right? So we're going to see if they can produce value, or if they can be innovative, or if they can look at education from a different perspective, a 21st century perspective. And in New York, in some schools in New York, they're already practicing mindfulness. They're already practicing conflict resolution.
And we have some schools here in Newark.
So in Newark. So if they're doing it in Newark, that's great. That should be a part of the culture of how we develop the whole human being. And suspending someone for 45 days, that's not how you develop the whole human being.
Did we ever find out? We found out what school that was.
Yeah, right? It was North Star.
Yeah, that's what we were told.
It was North Star. And the young man has still been having trouble. I asked Natasha to link me up with him because I would like to talk to him. So, we have to save him, and we have to help him. We have to work with him. So I asked her to, bring him to lunch with me so I can meet him.
So let me ask you a question,
that's one thing I want to do.
So while a kid is out of school for 45 days, right, is there any intervention? I mean, the school doesn't send a resource to the house?
They should have home. If a student is out of school that long, they should have some kind of home instruction that should be provided from the school, and that should happen if a student is out on a long-term suspension. But I think it also needs to happen if you send a student home on a short-term suspension. And that's why I go back to the point that I made a few weeks ago. I don't think that suspending students and sending them outside of the classroom where they desperately need the instructional time, I don't think that really helps our students, and I don't think it really adds any value. I think in a perfect world, what I would like to see are, centers where our students can actually go into, and they can serve their suspicions in those particular centers that would be housed with resources. So there would be, teachers there that can provide them with some instruction. And I think it should be mandatory for them to also have some kind of a counseling session if a student is suspended. Because I think the disconnect there is, you took an action, we thought that action violated our policy, or it did violate one of our policies, and now we're going to give you the discipline that's associated with that. There's a missed opportunity when we don't connect the dots and go full circle with that student to, one, find out what the root cause of the student's action or behavior was. Because again, behaviors are what caused the students to get in trouble, right? So if you're not getting to the root cause of the behaviors, guess what? You put the student back in the same environment, they're faced with the same situation again. Who's to say that they're not going to take the same action or exhibit the same behaviors that they did previously? Because again, we missed that teachable moment to circle back with those students and kind of get to the root cause of that issue. And then also to discuss with students how this actual situation of being punished has impacted them. Right? Because in their mind, this is a punishment. And also from the school's mind, it's punitive, right? So I don't know anybody on the face of this planet who's been punished, and in their mind, they haven't had some kind of process, right? Well, why was I punished like this?
What would be your, let me ask you a question, because I value your opinion in this space. What would, first of all, I bought you a book. I believe,
and I love books.
I believe in reading. Books. Is empowering, and I always get my friend here books, but I thought I was going to be selfish today and give you your own book.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
The Education of Blacks in the South from 1860 to 1935. Ooh. This is a perfect book for you.
Thank you.
Because it gives us the footprint of how African Americans coming out of slavery valued education. It actually created the loose federation of schools across the South that led itself to the public school system we have today. And African Americans had complete ownership and understood to break the cycle of poverty and slavery that they needed to educate themselves. That was a priority. And in that book there, it really gave me a better insight of why education was so important to us as a people. And I think what's happening now, and a lot of us are allowing other communities to define what our value in education is. So I gave you that book because there's a great opening from Frederick Douglass in that book talking about education and the importance of education. And I thought that, in your travels, because you speak to so many people and you have been involved in this education debate, and I know you take this very seriously, I wanted to give that book to you.
Thank you. I appreciate this. And when I read this, one thing I value is having the opportunity to share what I know with my son. My son is 6.
Great.
So we have conversations about critical issues that impact the black community, particularly black men. And I tell him all the time, son, you're a young man. And he sometimes says, Dad, I'm not a man yet. And I said, son, you are. And these issues, these things that we talk about, I try to provide context and understanding for him so he can see the value in the things that we're doing to help develop him as a young man.
Well, I see the value in you. That's why, giving books away, we give books away in my family all the time. That's a big thing for us. So I see value in you, and I know if you put that in your DNA, you'll be able to talk to people about that in your profession. I mean, we talk about so many different things. I mean, we just talked about mindfulness.
Right.
We just talked about, dealing with the conflict of, suspension. I mean, so that kind of book helped me to understand why education is so important for our community, and we need to place more value on it. I don't think African Americans placed the value that we placed on education.
Well, we don't.
It's really interesting.
But when I was growing up, I mean, there was an arc, right? When I was growing up as a kid, there was a tremendous amount of value placed on education. I remember my grandmother sitting down in the sun porch, man, and teaching me how to read. And there were always books, there were puzzles, but there were fewer distractions too, right? We didn't have, and we talked a little bit about this, we didn't have television that was on 24 hours a day. We didn't have smartphones and other kinds of devices. We didn't have video games. You had to go and you had to be creative, and you had to figure out what to do with your time.
But don't you think that with all of this information that we have at our disposal, information that we had to go get books, we had to sit in rooms, we had to, I mean, the world is so big now. We could just get information like at a snap of our fingers, right? Don't you think that is a great opportunity for learning and developing your mind?
I'm going to give you an analogy.
To be able to, yeah, go ahead.
And this is my analogy.
I'm just asking that question. Wouldn't you think that would be a great thing for us?
It would be. But this is an analogy that I used as a dad. And if you ever had a puppy, right? They tell you when you get a puppy, you can't just give the puppy free rein, right? You have to start the puppy out in a small area until the puppy can master that area, and then you grow the area. Same thing with your children, right? You can't just give your children free rein over the whole house. You have to give them a little responsibility and a little more and a little more. And when you dump all of this on people and you don't teach them how to use it, do you understand what I'm saying? They misuse it.
Right.
And so that's what has happened. And nobody ever took the time. You just give somebody a smartphone, or you give them an iPad, or you give them a whatever.
Let me can I laugh about something with you guys? And I see this all the time. I go to the supermarket, and in my neighborhood, they're actually selling the New York Times now. I mean, my neighbors know that's a big deal for us.
Oh, that's
right?
huge.
Because I don't have to go to Penn Station. I don't have to go to Montclair. I don't have to go to South Orange. I mean, the people in my community, they read the New York Times.
Yes.
So I don't normally make it over there early enough sometimes, right, because I'm busy doing something else. So my neighbor always orders the papers for us and put them to the back of the supermarket. So every time I go to buy the paper, I have the Daily News. I might purchase the Star Ledger occasionally, but I have the Wall Street Journal. I have the New York Times. So every time I go pay for the papers, it's just as funny. The young ladies look at me and say, "Oh my God, you're going to read all of this?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "Oh my God, this is very pricey. This is expensive." She said, "You could go buy food with this." I said, "But I am buying food." I just think it's, me and the ladies laugh. I love the ladies over there. But we laugh because to buy a paper like that, when I was growing up, the New York Times was a big deal in my household. You had to read the New York Times in my household. You had to read the Star Ledger when it was at its best. You had to read the Jersey City Journal. We had to read that stuff. And when I went to St. Benedict's, I mean, if you could not read in St. Benedict's or read Keats, or if you couldn't read the top literature of the time, you weren't even taken serious.
Right.
You know, in my household, I mean, my friends, we would laugh at you. We'd be like, "My God, you didn't read that?" You know, and believe it. And I hated To Catch You in the Rye. I hated all that stuff.
My dad used to give us
one of my
he used to bring the
I
New York,
hate that book.
He used to bring the New York Times.
I think that's why you're mentally ill, because that's one of your favorites. Catching the Rye. Every time you read Catching the Rye, you go kill somebody.
Yeah, man. That's scary, man. I'm glad you're between the two of us. Right?
Oh, wait a minute. Listen, he said it was his favorite.
And did you see the way he looked at
I had English professors that actually were Columbia professors teaching us English, and and teaching us. I had a different experience in school. My classrooms are very small. That's why I believe in small classrooms. My professors, my teachers were masters at their crafts in literature and math, and I was one of those students, right, that I had no time for him. None of them. I'm like, listen, I did that already. My brain was just active like that, right? So my mother was like, well, wait a minute. They're much smarter than you. They're much more accomplished than you. You go to school and you listen to them. And when you can come back and do what they're doing, then you can talk crap to me. She said, but if you ever walk out of a classroom where I'm paying for you to be, I'm going to break your legs, So, but I had a lot of fun in school because it was very competitive. But my community, where I lived at, they would not tolerate me not going to school or being the best that I can be. Right, and I think that's some of the things that are missing in our community, and until we can get back to that real basic element of why we value education, and that's why I gave you the book, I think we're going to always be missing the mark. And then when we get people to represent us in the education marketplace or in the education field, if they don't have the capacity to see the totality of that issue, they should not be leading us.
I agree with that.
Because, if I dare call up someone and that's representing us in the education marketplace and say, hey, you know what? Did you read this or did you read that? Did you read the Brookings Institute's report on this? Did you and they don't know that. Well, that's an injustice for us. They should not be representing us, right?
Yeah, you're right.
I agree. And so there's at times and I've felt this way serving as a member of the Board of Education, that when it came to educational matters, individuals throughout the city had this air of arrogance. Like, if it's not happening in Newark, then it's not happening. And what I've come to find out is that by not keeping a finger on the pulse to the things that are taking place nationally, things that are trending in other communities, we're missing out on a lot of opportunities. And, you know, we're failing to collaborate with schools that are already located in what I consider to be one of the strongest educational hubs in the Northeast Corridor, right here in the city of Newark. So when we go back and we have that conversation about educating the whole child, I love what's happening at my son's school at Phillips Academy Charter School. My son is in kindergarten, and he has a class that he takes. It's a pull-in service. We have the counselor for the school comes in, and they provide the students with a class course called character culture. My son is 6, and we can have conversations about conflict resolution.
Well, one of the things about St. Philip's Academy, my daughter graduated from there when it was the real St. Philip's Academy, where you had to speak French, and you know, it was very. I mean, it was a very tight curriculum, and a lot of those students went on and done some great things. My daughter just graduated from LMU. She's in California, you know, living her life. She's very talented, you know, very unique individual, and I'm just tired of, you know, subsidizing her. I hope she makes some more money. but it, you know, St. Philip's, like St. Benedict's, like all of the other schools that were tinkering with the education model, you know, 25 years ago. Yeah. You know, and to hear, right, and you know, and right, they were way ahead of the curve. And you know, that's why I think it's a great opportunity for us now. Forget what's happening at the school board. They're not even players in this debate anymore. We, you know, we have to talk about them because they are part of the community, and they have a position that could be detrimental to the future of our families and communities. But there are a lot of people in the city of Newark that really get what we're saying, and they've been talking about it for years. I mean, I know my mentor's granddaughter, Mr. Wise, his granddaughter is one of the top students that North Star ever had. One day she was having a bad day. I'm just going to tell you how we always have to be careful how we measure our children, how we protect our children. She was having a bad day. And this is the top student of North Star's history, probably. They were going to suspend her. And because she had a strong grandfather who was absolutely brilliant, he stepped in and said, "You will not, you know, suspend my child. You will not do that to my child who has been working tirelessly to bring value to her life and bring value to what she believes in as a young lady." And schools, right, it's a great opportunity now to take some of these schools and slice them in half and take all of those best practices and try to re-engineer them without conflict. I don't need you at the doors banging down the doors when we're trying to educate and empower our kids with a new kind of innovative approach to empowering them as students. And this is what you have in the city of New York. You have so much conflict because I don't believe people really clearly understand this education debate from a real world perspective. And that's why when we talked yesterday about you coming in and talking about the thing that we emailed you yesterday about what's happening in various districts and how wealthy people are investing in those districts and how it's impacting education in their communities based on redistricting. All of this stuff is the kind of conversation we should be having in our community. So that's one of the things that I'm very happy that you're bringing us and focusing us in that way, that it gives us the opportunity to have this kind of conversation.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take a real quick drop, and then when we come back, we're going to get into that into that discussion.
You're listening to the Eric Dawson Radio Show on 94.3 FM.
So, folks, as you said, Kevin, when I read the article, and we talked about it at the end of yesterday's show, you can see that people are fighting for the schools that they're investing in, and they're valuing education in a way that we're not valuing it in our community. And even though we have these discussions and try to bring parents more in line with that way of thinking, you know, we find it complicated to do, you know. But for sure, you know, folks are engaged in a ferocious battle to ensure that their children get a great education.
Yeah. So I saw this when I read the article. the first thing that jumped out to me.
Can you make reference to it because people might, that just
let me I'm gonna post it again.
Okay? Yeah, because some people
post that article, and you guys did a great job of breaking down the difference.
Did we? Because I didn't think so.
With the rezoning.
Okay,
right? Of you had school 199, school 191, and so the backstory, right? That's really important to understand is that this battle of integrating schools has been ongoing in New York City. It's been ongoing in New York City for decades, right? There's been a huge political pushback, but from the family's perspective, these individuals who are moving into these communities, they are spending up to $500,000. Because in this article, it references a family who paid $400,000 for a 1-bedroom apartment in this particular community just because this public school was one of the best public schools in New York City.
Right.
And this whole restructuring or rezoning then put them in a zone that matched them with one of the lowest performing schools. Now, translate that to what we see happening in the city of Newark. We start talking about school choice. This article highlights one of the major issues and major concerns that we have in our city. School choice should not just mean that you have the ability to just take your kid out of a school, right, and put them anywhere else, and the other folks that are responsible for making sure that these schools are good schools are not being held accountability, not being held accountable. So there's two aspects to the choice. Not only do you need to have the ability to move your child to the school you want, but it's not really choice if the individuals who are responsible for making sure that that school that you removed your kid from is a high quality school. We're not really pushing school choice, because at the end of the day, not every parent's going to be able to take their kid out of that school and put them somewhere else, because there are not enough high quality schools throughout the city of Newark. And what that says is at the end of the day, you are going to have winners and you are going to have losers.
Wow.
And that is a huge problem.
Wow.
But here's the truth of the matter, though, right? And this is how I read it. And I know if Ian was here, here goes Eric. He got one every show. What makes it, to me, is the level of engagement that the parents are having.
Amazing.
Right? So it's not about money. My grandmother finished the 6th grade, but she cared about making sure we had an education. And when we were left with my grandmother while my parents had to work and something went wrong in school, she grabbed me by the earlobe and marched me down to school to resolve whatever the issue was.
But your grandmother had a different moral compass.
But I'm saying, but it wasn't. I just want to be clear, because we're talking about a $400,000 home and all these other. It wasn't about money.
Right.
You see, it was just about a value for education.
But
it was an investment, though.
It was an
Am I
investment.
correct?
Yeah, it's an investment.
Okay,
but let's go back to what.
But I just don't want people to say, "Well, I don't have $400,000."
No. He wasn't making.
That's not absolutely not it.
But he wasn't making.
But I'm going to go back to the point we made a few weeks last week, which was there are primarily three reasons that families, well, 3 issues that most people consider when purchasing their home.
That's right.
Property taxes.
That's right. You said that.
Safe community.
That's right.
In the schools.
That's absolutely right.
Absolutely.
So here, in this article, it highlights the fact that people in New York City are making huge investments, right, in property, specifically because these properties are located in zones or districts where they have the highest performing schools.
You know what I got out of the article?
Yeah,
when I was reading the article, the principal from 191, right, didn't just fold tail and run.
No, she stood up to it.
She stood up to it, man, and she said, "My school is a good school. I'm doing great work," and she began marketing her school, her efforts, her teachers to all of these people who were getting ready to bail. She said, "No, wait."
But the other thing that I picked up on just by listening to you some more, because I read it over the weekend and it's kind of leaving me. But the thing that I found so compelling was that the parents and the community, or the people, the community, the school community, they said one thing clear to me. I understand their property values, I understand their investment, but they said the most precious asset that we have is our children.
That's absolutely right.
And that's the missing component that I'm seeing in the city of Newark, because of the decisions that I've seen made in the last several months or the last several years about the issue of education. Do we really value the most important asset, our most important asset, which are our children? And it speaks to the low turnout for the school board. It speaks to the quality of leadership we have on the school board. It speaks to, why aren't we having a different kind of innovative and bold kind of conversation about re-engineering our public schools, right? And holding our charter schools more accountable. So when I read the article, I said, wow, this group or these people that are moving into these communities, they're saying, look, we're going to place our money here, but we're placing our money here because this is the most valued asset we have, which are our children. So I got caught up in that.
But it was a deep.
It's a long article. You got to break it down
right now. Please share this link to the show right now. Please do that right now. Okay.
So now I want to go back a few decades. Let's make another connection to Newark. Now, I think we could go out here and we could have conversations in the community about making Newark Public Schools great again. Because when you sit down and you talk to individuals who were enrolled in some of the comprehensive high schools prior to the riots, which then led to white flight in the community, individuals can point back to a point in time where Weequahic High School was one of the top high schools, not just in the state, but in the nation.
In the nation. It was the number one school in the nation at one point.
Now, when we go back to this article references the white flight, how when these individuals, these wealthy parents, saw that the schools were starting to integrate, they decided to take their kids out, put them in the private schools for those that could afford them, or exercise the other aspects of school choice. Now, fast forward to where we are now. We have a similar situation that's taking place in our community right now, but it's not white flight. It's more of the classism.
That's right.
Individuals who are middle class in communities like Newark and other urban communities, guess what?
They're bouncing.
They're bouncing, but they're also galvanizing, taking advantage of this opportunity to utilize school choice programs, not just universal enrollment, but we know that there's a state level program also that allows you to enroll your child in any other school district in the state of New Jersey, as long as that school is a participant in that school choice program, at no cost to you as a parent, because it's still one of the schools in the public domain, and individuals are taking advantage of it. But the folks who are most who are mainly taking advantage of those opportunities are the middle class families who understand how to navigate this system. Those individuals,
an informed consumer,
right? Exactly, and they understand the importance that they need to have a strong investment in education for their children. And when we look at Newark, why do we have under-enrollment? Why were our most of our schools under-enrolled when we started to see the emergence of charter schools in the community?
Because we've all felt they were failing.
Right? So we have...
Is that the reason why?
Yes,
okay.
Right? And we have
question.
Flight.
Right.
They left those schools, flight. And that was not... For whoever was in the driver's seat,
but listen, man,
did not have the fortitude and the vision to see we need to re-engineer these schools so that they can be more competitive.
But part of it is re-engineering the schools. I think the other part is engaging the parents, working with the parents, figuring out why.
Well, we missed that. But we missed that opportunity.
But we have to do that. But we can't complain that people are. See, when I was listening to the whole argument about charter schools in the community and shut them down, moratoriums, I'm saying, what sane parent would keep their kid on a sinking boat? You know, get off that boat.
Yeah.
Now,
the uneducated parent.
The uneducated parent.
The uneducated parent that these the political whoremongers want to keep deaf, dumb, and blind.
Right, I agree
Right,
with that.
you understand? Because we have this conversation in this space all the time. We're not doing enough to make sure that these individuals can make the right decisions, that they're not informed enough. Because if these individuals were informed enough, you have a freaking uprising right now. The conversation wouldn't be about this school or that school. The conversation will be about, goddamn it, make all of the schools great.
But we have to be clear, right, that the real battle is between those people who are trying to inform and those people who are trying to keep people uninformed.
Absolutely.
That is the battle, guys. And so, part of this show and other places, and I love what you do, Kev, where you post and say for the informed class.
Oh yeah, well, I'm very
it's
serious
important
about
for
that.
people to understand.
Important.
Here's where you can go to get information, because information is king. So back to all the way back to where you were talking at the beginning of the show about the New York Times and all information. You're trying to get information so that you have the power then to advocate for yourself.
So let me ask you this question, Eric. From your perspective.
Yep.
And Kevin, you can feel free to answer
Absolutely,
this as well.
thank you.
Let's keep it simple on this, because I want to hammer a point on this one.
Okay.
How difficult do you believe it is to inform and engage parents in Newark?
I think it's very difficult. So not simply because you got to figure out how to reach the parents, but like I said, the obstacle is all of these other entities that are in your way, that are misinforming parents. So you have to jump over all of those hurdles. You got to get around all that stuff to try to get to the parent.
I believe it's all about value. I believe that our community has lost. I mean, we don't value education as our own. We don't own it. Somebody else owns it, right? So it's very difficult to get people to buy in something that they don't value, that they don't own. I believe that they send their kids to school because they really care about their kids, right? And they want to have their kids have a decent education, but they don't value it. They don't see it as an opportunity to break the cycle of poverty for themselves, generational poverty. They don't see it as an opportunity for them to build a brighter future for their family, not just the child, but the family. So there's no ownership. I don't believe in this community that we own the issue of education. You have CMOs that, they tell everybody in America that they're doing so much for black kids, right? And I get that, right? But we don't own that message. They do.
But Kev,
this is my point. We have to own it. We have to value it, right? Our return on investment is our child, and that child progressing through life, which will help our families to evolve in the future, right? That's why that book was so important, the education of blacks in the South, and why it was so important. So you asked that question, so that's why I wanted to see if I can answer it that way. It's about, when we get up and do this show, we're informing because we value information, and we believe it's an empowerment tool for parents and community leaders and other people to think beyond where they are, where they're sitting. And I think young parents, I have a daughter, 35 years old. She has 2 sons. They are brilliant, right? We talk about stuff, and I could see a detachment when it comes to this stuff. There's a huge detachment, and I'm her father. Because what she's working on is raising her 2 boys, but she doesn't understand the more she empowers herself here, empowers them and lifts them. That's what I mean about value ownership.
This is the issue. Great insight on this, the nuance of empowering and engaging parents. My problem with the conversation about parental engagement, parental involvement, is that this has been an issue that's been documented. It's been a documented issue in Newark since 1995. 22 years. 22 years that we can't get this parental engagement, parental involvement.
Nobody's really trying. That's just what I'm saying to you. Nobody is really trying.
No, I think they gave the. I know. I'm agreeing with you. I think they gave us the illusion that they were trying.
That's absolutely right.
That's what I mean. That's
That's
I just wanted to add.
So there's been you've had groups that have come in, people that have come in that use the buzzword engage and empower parents, but it's a net with big holes in it, right? And so people just keep falling through because nobody's really trying to do that.
But you know what? But you bring up a good point. But what does it mean when we say it?
That's absolutely.
What is an empowered parent?
I'll tell you.
You know what I mean? Like, what does it actually mean?
So, an empowered parent to me,
Because what it means to some people is that we control them, which allows us to control the dialogue, which allows us to control the policy, which allows us to continue to keep profiteering off of our children, which allows us to keep them, stagnant and dormant and not lending their voice because they really don't understand, by being an engaged parent, how empowering it is for their community.
Well, I'm not good because that's exactly what I was going to say. So go ahead.
Now, I will add something on to that. In reading the article that you posted about white privilege and school choice in New York City, one thing that was highlighted was the strength of the parent organizations.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Right. And I want to add that as another layer to the parental engagement, parental involvement. These individuals were able to raise over $200,000, which put that parent organization in a very, very unique position. So when that school said, listen, we had budget cuts that came down from the state this year, they were able to say, hold on, we still want to make sure we have teacher aides or teacher assistants in each one of the classrooms. So when there was a shortage in the budget and the school was unable to cover the cost of those 2 additional teacher assistants, that parent-teacher organization was able to pay for that. But understanding that in order for that to happen,
PS 199,
right? And in order for that to happen, the school leadership has to value you enough as a parent to even come to the table and have that conversation with you. Now we look at what's going on in our city. I want to ask you, for you parents out there, how many of you parents were asked to sit down at the table when the principals were considering what they were going to do with their school budgets for the upcoming year? How many school principals had conversations with your PTA to say, listen, we have an issue right now. We have a gap in our budget we need to fill because we've been flat funded, right? Which means we actually lost money because inflation is constant. How many of those principals had conversations and said, listen, PTA, you've been doing a great job. We know that you guys are in this with us. We need to sit down and talk to you guys about filling this budget gap with $25,000 so that we don't have to cut any after-school programs.
I'd really like to know the answer to that. So if you guys are listening, you're a parent, you have kids in school, you were or are part of a PTA, PTO, give us a call. Let us know how you're working with the school and vice versa, 97345.
But that's a very good point.
And that's what is powerful now, because
it requires bringing people to the table and sharing power.
I think the debate of education has been railroaded by special interests over these years, so that's not a priority. And the parents, as you just mentioned, are disconnected from the whole system itself. And the principals, I believe the principals are mired in the same conflict, which doesn't allow them to think beyond where they are. So they don't really think it's important to bring a parent in and have that kind of conversation, as opposed to bringing a parent in and say, I need you to help me fight this. So there's no real proactive dialogue going on about it.
So words matter to me, right? So,
Absolutely.
So Kevin said parents are disengaged. I'm going to say parents have been disengaged because now that means that somebody or some entity disengaged them. See, when you say that parents are disengaged, and now you're wondering, well, how that happened. But if you say they have been disengaged, then that says that those special interest groups and other people have intentionally worked to disengage parents and what's the opposite of empowered? Whatever that is, depower or whatever it is, parents to be advocates in their own futures, and so that's what it been.
But what does it take? A community? Look, we see all of the negative trends when we don't have good quality schools in our community. We see the economic impact, we see the social impact, we see the criminal impact. We see a complete breakdown of our community when our kids are not really engaged, or our community is not engaged on the issue of education. What will it take for us to get past our malaise, right? That's the word, and get down to some real serious discussion without people, commandeering it for some bull crap. I mean, we've been having this discussion, I said earlier on your show a couple of weeks ago, the discussion about education in Newark has been clear. When we say education in Newark, we say failure.
Right.
I mean, that theme has not been broken. That narrative has not been broken. So what would it take Can somebody tell us?
So here's
what will it
Veronica-
take
So
for
Veronica,
us to do that?
So Veronica Castro says we, and I want to know who she means by we.
She's
But
talking
she
about her.
says-
She's a community leader. She's a parent
Right,
leader.
she says we have a very good relationship with our school leader. Right, I am one of the heads of the PTA. She said, but the biggest problem is engaging parents. Right, so I don't know if you can call in, Veronica, but
so say that again. Read that again. I'm so
right,
sorry.
that's what I'm saying. That's why I had to pause. Right, so she said we, and I want to know who we are. We have a very good relationship with our school leader. So I don't know who the we are.
Well, she's saying I think I know what she's saying, and let me see if I can
and she's
interpret.
saying she's the head of one of the
Well,
heads of the
she's
PTA.
probably one of the most active parents in Newark, and I think her kids go to KIP or North Star. I mean, we're all a part of that community, so I know some of these parents. So she's saying we. There are some active parents.
Oh,
and
we the PTA.
Right, and I brought that up several days ago. There are some really good parents out here, so maybe that's where we start. And we try to, develop a different kind of strategic science for them to be able to take what they're doing and advance that in a much more aggressive way than just this one day at a time scenario that they've been engaged in resolving small issues. Like globalize their process, create a science, an institutional science that they can use to advance themselves, right? So I understand what she's saying when she says we. So she's active. There's a group of parents in the city of Newark that are active. But now, are they active in this space, what we're talking about? Are they active in talking about re-engineering education? Are they active in talking about who we want to represent us?
Oh, this is scary.
You know what I mean?
Somebody says, so I don't know how to pronounce your first name, Kim Cosby Thomas. Tashir says, parents want to know what is in it for them to engage in the schools. Are you kidding me? Your kid.
Well, that's an honest. Oh, you asked a couple of questions, and that's an honest question.
No, I'm not saying it's not an honest. It scares me.
Can I unpack?
No, it doesn't scare me though, because that's the kind of
that though.
Yeah, unpack it.
Go ahead.
Quid pro quo. They feel this way because there are organizations who are in this space, and they are coming to the parents saying, we, members of this organization, want this from you as a parent. Parents have seen that over the last few years. Put on a bus, send them down to Trenton to testify.
Take some photos.
Take some photo ops. We want you to deliver the message. We want you to carry our water.
And then what they do is they market that. Then they send it to the wealthy philanthropists that are trying to do goodwill, and the liberals, and progressives. We got to save those black kids. And then they send those marketing materials out, and they raise more money for whatever their broader vision is, for what they think we should be valuing in the education space. So what she's saying, but I respect that. You should say that again. That's very important.
And I'm not agreeing with the stance, what's in it for me, but I think for individuals who sit on the outside and see their peers or other individuals being used, let me take that back, because if you can't be used, you're useless. But for them to see their peers and fellow parents be overused and abused, when you start tapping those individuals on the shoulder and say, hey, yeah, we need you to get on this bus and go down here too. Whoa. What's in it for me?
Well, everybody
Because I see what you're doing to these other folks, because I know such and such and such and such. They've been on your bus. They've been on your rallies. They've been going here. They've been going here. But didn't they just they just get fired last month? So like, what happened to those? Like, do I become another one of those individuals who gets caught up in all of the smoke and mirrors? Right? And I think that poses a huge problem. So when you start talking about that feeling of individuals feeling disempowered, like, what happens now when you're standing on the opposite side of that and you're watching all of these things go on, and you're seeing how, to your point, Eric, how parents are being taken advantage of?
Right.
That question, right? I really appreciate it, because everybody on that's listening to this show, everybody should be motivated by their self-interest. And your self-interest is your child and your community and what's happening.
Okay.
I always ask people, what do you want from me? So if a person tells me they want nothing from me, well, I can't do business.
Well, no, that's not what I mean.
No, I'm just saying, but I'm just going back.
So what's in it for you? A great educational opportunity for your child.
Right.
That's what's in it for you.
Right.
And now, once you understand that, and then you connect all the other stuff and say, well, if my kid doesn't get a great education, then this is what it means. If my kid isn't competing, then this is what their future holds. And so now, once you see that, then I think, as a parent, should be motivated. motivated.
Let's talk about some of these advocates.
But I think the reason they're not motivated is, remember on an earlier show I talked about Arrested Development.
Yeah.
Right, and I believe that that's part of it. I think that let's look at some of the parents that we're talking about. Some of them were children when they had children, right? And so they did not really have the tools, and they still may not have the tools to be able to get something done. So, like when Farrakhan called the other day, say, "Hey guys, you guys are speaking at this level up here. You need to bring it down because some of the parents don't get it." So we're putting, complex meals in front of people, but they don't necessarily have, and I don't mean it to be critical. I'm just trying to say I think this is the space that some people are in. You don't have a refined enough palate to really understand what's there. Yeah.
Well, let's take it.
Right? We need to break it down for them a little bit more. We got to meet them where they are.
Let's forget this. All of the advocacy organizations that have been representing parents for the last 6 or 7 years, coming out of the public school system, coming out of the charter school system, they're all motivated by what those institutions' self-interests are. And I don't believe that they're children, right? So let's look. If we called each one of those particular advocacy organizations to have this conversation, I dare say none of them could have this dialogue because they're not motivated by what we're motivated about: empowering a parent, educating and informing an parent, giving the parent the language or a deeper understanding of why they should value education. Every one of their organizing sessions is about talking about what choice is and why we have to fight for choice and why it's important for our kids to get a good education and see what we're doing for you. It's not really empowering them with that information so they can better understand why the connectedness is so important.
We're going to get right back to this after this break.
The current time, Blast Radio, 94.3. Reggae, dance hall, soca, hip-hop and R&B, African, disco, oldies but goodies.
Hi, this is Janet Jackson.
We're bridging the gap. Seriously. Splash Radio 94.3 New Jersey.
May 12th, the biggest Porsche bag Jersey has ever seen. Lux Entertainment brings to you New York meets New Jersey. Tourist State of Mind, Black and Gold Affair. The official birthday bash for Little Rihanna, DJ Temp, Hot Rod the God, and out of New York, DJ Rich Rated R. Friday, May 12, 2017, 48 Branford Place, North New Jersey. Music powered by DJ Biggs, DJ Ball, DJ Chronic, DJ Rich, DJ Dark Kent, and straight from New York City, DJ Kev Rich and Prince Chills. Doors open at 10 p.m. There will be tight security. All you can drink and birthday packages are available. For more information, please log on to touriststateofmind.eventbrite.com. Again, that's touriststateofmind.eventbrite.com. May 12th, New York meets New Jersey. Tourist State of Mind, Black and Gold Affair. Be there.
Are you looking for real Jamaican cooking? Look no further than the real, authentic, and bona fide spot in Newark, New Jersey. Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant at 347 Sanford Avenue, serving the best curry goat, oxtail, steamed fish, jerk curried fried, and brown stew chicken. Call today, 973-350-657. There's always a special at Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant. Stew beef Tuesdays, stew beef Wednesday, cow foot Thursdays, seafood and fish fry Fridays, Saturdays, it's Portland Jamaica style jerky. You name it. Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant is open every day, Monday to Thursday, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Friday and Saturdays till 10 p.m. And check out early Sundays, noon to midnight with all your favorite games. There's a live broadcast every Sunday at Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant with all your favorite DJs, catering and delivery. Call today, 973-350-6657 or check them on the web at starspressurepot.restaurant.com. It's always a good day at Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant. We know that when it comes to your vehicle maintenance, you've got a lot of options. In fact, with so many options, it can be challenging sometimes to find a reliable and affordable auto mechanic. But that's where we come in, Belmont Motor Works, with a commitment to providing our customers with honest, quality service at reasonable prices. Belmont Motor Works has one of the most modern, state-of-the-art automotive service and repair facility in the entire state of New Jersey. Our technology, education, and expertise will provide you with the best car care service imaginable. For an appointment Llame dial 973-268-8199. Right now, get a check engine light diagnostic, an oil change or tune-up, brakes, or just a performance upgrade. Belmont Motorworks got it covered. We're your one-stop shop, the European specialist, specializing in BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Range Rover, and all luxury and high-performance vehicles. 973-268-8199. We also install engines, transmissions, starters, alternators, timing belts, water pumps, and so much more. Trust the trusted Belmont Motorworks, conveniently located at 531 Central Avenue in Newark, New Jersey, and find us on the web at www.belmontmotorworks.com.
Mr. J represent for 94.3 FM Splash Radio. We don't splash out the music on them.
You're listening to the Eric Dawson Radio Show on 94.3 FM.
So, I guess the question really is, how do we get, because Veronica also came in, Castro said, a lot of the parents, she believes that we hit the nail on the head in saying that a lot of the parents were children who had children. And so we have to treat them as such and say, okay, what don't they understand? We want them to be here. We want them to be engaged, but maybe there are 2 or 3 additional steps we have to take before, we get them to where we need them to be. But what are those steps? Like, how do we get them to value and fight like these parents in New York City are fighting?
Money. And I'm not saying give them money. What I'm saying is we have to ensure that we're always tying education back to all of these critical issues. Crime. Individuals that are out here committing crimes and tearing down our community. And to my knowledge, these aren't the salutatorians or the valedictorians from our high schools in the community. These aren't the individuals that went away to, Harvard or to Columbia or to, William Patterson. You understand what I'm saying? Like, there's I think there's a huge correlation there's a huge correlation between how our students perform and the kind of experience they have in this K through 12 space and the kind of citizens they become in our community. You guys spent a lot of time yesterday talking about the report that was done by the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. And so when we start having that additional conversation about how our children are going to be able to take care of themselves and also be in a position to help support their parents when their parents become older, we have to also know that the facts state that when we look at individuals who are employed in the city of Newark, there are, amongst African American, there are 42.6% of those individuals, African Americans, who are employed, Newark residents, who are working in Newark and other cities. That 42.6%, they have some collegiate experience. They have some collegiate experience, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, advanced degree. What that means is having those credentials can help put you in a much better position. It makes you more marketable as an individual. It sets you apart from other individuals at times. And that's why we have to continue to push to make sure that we
Let me ask you a question.
Right,
Let me ask you a question, former chairman. In low-income communities, right, you see lots of billboards and advertisements about the military. Because they recognize that a lot of these kids are not going to have many options, and so they market that to them as an option, a way out. My question to you is, why doesn't the Board of Education use some of its financial resources to market, right, in a similar way to the community, explaining exactly what you just talked about, where it shows that a kid who graduates with a GPA of whatever goes off and has this great opportunity, somebody who, is struggling and challenging, that they wind up down this pathway? Why aren't they spending some money educating the community about that. I mean, I would love to see it on billboards. I'd love to see it on buses, driving down the street on a bus sign, everywhere, so that people can start to make the correlation. And even the kids can begin to make the correlation between, getting a great education and being able to be successful, or leaving school, dropping out of school, and then what that leads to.
Well, they aren't doing that because they haven't hired me to lead that advocacy campaign.
There you go. That's what I'm saying.
Now let's be real about it, right?
And I gotta let y'all know, I didn't know he was going to answer it like that, because otherwise it seems like I pitched a nice.
But you asked, so I'm going to be honest about it. That's why we have a problem within this educational environment where the wrong people are in positions, whether it's consultants or whether it's individuals that are brought on and hired full time. There's no reason why the Newark Public School District does not have a robust marketing and advertising campaign, and there's no reason why Newark Public Schools is not specifically advocating for that issue that you just kind of highlighted for us and using that as an opportunity to engage parents in critical dialogue about education.
Wow.
Nobody wants to be poor. Nobody wants to live paycheck to paycheck. I don't know any parent on this planet that wants to be having their kid and their children's children live with them when their child is 27, 28, 29 years old and they got 2 and 3 little babies that are running around here. And what does that do? That impacts quality of life. And the reason that individuals are in that, it's okay if you find yourself in a temporary situation, right? But when it's long term and you're in that situation, that means that there's a disconnect somewhere and those individuals are not able to sustain and take care of themselves.
When you were on the school board, did you have this conversation when you were in the school
We
board?
had these conversations all the time.
And what was the
marketing.
proactive, what happened?
Just never really materialized.
So they never had the money.
And I'll go back to the report that I helped lead, which was the first district assessment that was performed since the State Department of Education came and took over Newark Public Schools. And one of the major highlights of that report was that Newark Public Schools, and from our opinion, did not have a competitive plan to help them compete against the high-performing charter schools in the city of Newark.
So do you believe
that I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just another question. So we recognize that the board's not going to do it. We recognize that you have the skill set to get it done. What do we need to do to put a plan together and then pitch that plan to some private partners who might invest in that plan, understanding that there's a value add to, marketing this information out to the community? Or do you think that that's not viable?
No, I don't. I think what we're missing in our community is an entrepreneur. If we were driving our own small business, and if we were driving industry, and we had ownership of some of that industry, you would be seeing a different kind of conversation in our communities. I think we're just participants, right? I mean, so the small business owner, if we had, 25 to 35% of our community driven by small business that's owned by African Americans, right? You would see a different level of participation. But what you're talking about, I just can't see happening. But back to you. What is your second degree in education? What you're working on your second master's?
Yeah, I'm working on the second master's.
And what is that in?
Educational management, leadership, and policy.
Okay, see now, you were on the school board for how many years?
3.
3 years. And you were the president of the school.
Yeah, for 1 year.
Right, and you have gone on and got another advanced degree.
Yeah, I'm finishing that up right now. Also, I have an MBA right now.
Well, you know what your problem is? I'll tell you what your problem is. You're an African American male that really gets it. This system doesn't want African American males like you. So that's why we sell weak, leaders, African American males, right? We sell them to our community because we want to have ownership of them. Yeah. We don't want to have ownership of the issue of education. We don't want to bring value to our community. We don't want to empower parents to understand what you're talking about and what Eric is talking about. We want to control you. Yeah. So that not having an entrepreneurial community or the entrepreneurial class has just been wiped off the face of the earth in our city. Right? So we can't have a vocational discussion. We can't have a high impact discussion because we don't have you at the table. Now, I dare say if we went and had this conversation with a bunch of our school board members elected, however they got there, they're elected, right? I dare say they wouldn't even know what you were talking about. They would have no concept of how to develop an institutional science to get to where we want to be by addressing those critical issues of ownership, those critical issues of what we do to re-engineer our schools, because they've been here for some time. So what they do is they open up their pack of information every meeting, and the colonialists tell them to roll call. And they vote. Some of them do ask questions, but they're only one person. So we don't support that group. I would like to talk to that group to see if they want to work with people like yourself and people like, other people in the community to really address the education issue and really put strong leadership in place. You don't have to be on the school board to do that.
Absolutely not.
They're not going to bring you into the Newark Public Schools to have this conversation.
All right, so here's another question. Donna Benson, she says, please speak to why there has been so much conversation both for and against charter schools and school choice, and very little conversation about the fact that Newark has been failing to educate our children for the last 20 years or more. I graduated from University High. We attended class 11 months of the year. Parents were required to attend team meetings once a month with the teacher. Students were required to maintain a level of excellence. Is this an unrealistic goal today?
So I don't think it's unrealistic.
That's a good question.
I think that this conversation about district versus charter schools provides an excuse for the failed leadership and a lack of vision that we have at the helm right now. That's my opinion. I think it's much easier to sit here and blame charter schools to say, oh, they're taking money from our traditional public schools, as opposed to getting everybody at the table to see how we can best leverage our position and our collective purchasing power.
But don't you think that?
Right?
But don't you think that when someone says that, right, that they're taking money away from our traditional public schools,
they don't understand.
Now wait a minute though. But I think they do, in a very simple way. They are taking money away from our traditional public schools. So that's a fact. Mm-hmm. But the reason why it's happening is because we haven't done a great job of creating an education ecosystem, right, that will create balance, right? So when someone says that, I think they're from a very, very, from a narrow perspective, they are actually stating the truth. But the byproduct of this failed school system is allowed a more competitive environment for other education, let's say, for the lack of a better word, programs to come and play, right? That we believe might give us more value for our our kids' success, right? But if we now the paradigm shift is occurring because we're looking at both models, and we're trying to re-engineer, right, the public schools so they can be competitive with the charter schools. But I believe the charter schools are a byproduct of the failure of the public schools. But I don't believe that the charter schools are the end-all be-all either.
No, I agree.
So, but see, and this is what we have to get to. We have to get past that debate because, by admitting that it does take money from the traditional public school system. But the charter schools and the traditional public schools are one system, but they've been defined differently for different reasons by different interest groups.
Got it. So
this is interesting. So how do you pronounce the name again?
Tashir.
So Tashir says, and I want you to respond to that. She says that Bayo Parent Leader classes provide parents with the tools to know what questions to ask. So I'd like to have a list of those questions so that we can make them available here. My question is this: why operate in a silo? Why not provide that to anybody? Why just in that class with these parents?
So I can speak to that, and I've had the opportunity to actually go and speak to the parents in some of those classes, specifically on the topic of local control and governance of the board, so they had a better understanding of what the board's role is in the community. Mm-hmm. Also, before New Jersey Bayo closed its doors, I was working with LeVar Young to actually develop a civics curriculum, because he wanted to expand what they were actually teaching to the parents, which I thought was excellent, because what you started to see from the group of parents that went through these parent leadership trainings, you now started to have parents raising their hands saying, okay, now I see how this thing really works.
Right.
And now I want to be a part of it. Right. Now I need to know how I can go out here and I can be a parent who's been in these classes, and now because I don't like what my council person is doing, I need to know how I can step in that
Now,
space
let me ask you a
and
question.
challenge that.
Why do you think bail is no longer supported in the state of New Jersey?
I think bail is no longer supported, and this is my personal assessment. I think
Of
that
course it's your personal assessment.
bail's overall goal in their movement was for them to be more community centered, which is not the focus of other organizations in this space. Meaning that the work that bail was performing was being driven by the issues that were being brought to them by the parents and members of the community. They were not working from a top-down perspective. And I say that because I've been in those meetings with them, and I've heard the critical questions that have been asked, and I've heard the issues that have been raised in that space with LeVar Young, with Chanel Duns, and from the parents that they've taught in their leadership
But
academy.
now, full disclosure, I told you. Remember, I told you in an earlier show that I actually interviewed for that same position that LeVar was in, and I understood through those different interviews. I went on 3 different interviews that the way they were setting the thing up, it was doomed to fail. And I told them that in the meeting.
Well, I don't know if it was doomed to fail.
The way that they were going to support it, it was doomed to fail.
Those are two different issues. Okay,
I got that.
But what I find, because I've helped to build some of these funding models for these institutions over the years. I believe that the wealthy philanthropists, the Walton Foundations, and a number of key foundations in the country are not really seriously vested in that kind of capacity building. They say they are, so they strangle you. So when you build a funding model, they'll be at the top of the chain, and they'll give you a grant for $1 million for 3 years, right? Well, and we all know that's not enough to really build capacity. But then when you go around the other parts of the country building your funding model, and really connecting it, they all have the same, colonialist mentality. Well, I need to see a lot of outcome, and I need you to give me a lot of your strategic plan, but you're always held hostage by them and fulfilling your obligation to the parents you're talking about empowering, right? So I understand how that game is played. So bail, to me, was never going to have a real opportunity to do that because their funding model was flawed from the beginning.
That's absolutely right.
And building a funding model and then understanding how you deal with these intermediaries that are driving who gets that money is a science within itself. Yeah. So you go in as a very articulate person and you explore capacity, building high-impact social engineering programs for your parents to be engaged at all levels. They don't like you.
They don't. That's absolutely
They don't want you. That's too big. That's too big. What they want to do is keep us, suppressed so they can get their agenda, so they can build a national model that gives them credibility to say that they're doing something for black folk.
And so now, understanding that, right?
Now, was that clear?
No. Yeah,
that was good.
Right? Okay. So now you got PC2E, who had a funding model similar, right?
They didn't have a funding model. They didn't have funding model. What happened was the CMOs, Ryan from KIP, wanted to create an advocacy arm and give them arm's length, create an advocacy arm, which he went out and got money for. He went and got money for it. So all of the bad investment, the $1 million that have been spent in the last year, is because of his bad investment. He got no return on investment. And they're so arrogant that they're even talking about funding this failed experiment again. But who's going to be harmed by that is the parents.
So the question that I'm going to ask is, so now you have bail with the funding model we talked about, and you got the investment, the bad investment, and the fundraising by Ryan Hill in terms of PC2E. What then do you do to engage these parents?
Well, what we're doing right now is telling the parents the 3-card Monty that's going on, because we've all been under the lid. And it is our responsibility to inform them. So we talked about how do we deal with building capacity. We talked about how do we educate by empowering them to understand they need to have ownership of the issue. And then what we've been talking about is why these advocacy organizations have not done a good job. And when the funding dries up because their funding models are flawed, it leaves a negative impact on those parents. It leaves a negative impact on trust. And what this school board election did was show exactly what the problem is. Parents are not plugged into the matrix of that illusion. They don't trust it, and they really don't trust it now. So that's this conversation is empowering enough to get them at least to think when they walk in the rooms from now on, they can say, you know what, I was just hearing a conversation about this, and maybe they can ask another question that might bring some critical dialogue to say, listen, we got to do a better job. We're not buying your program. You need to buy our program now.
So I want to talk about what I'm doing, and this is professionally. You guys know that I stepped out to and I launched my consulting firm, Broad Street Consulting Group, in December. And my focus, one of my primary focuses, is to work with charter schools, not just in Newark, but throughout the state of New Jersey, to help them, and also school districts that need support in developing strong advocacy campaigns. But I want to make this distinction because I think this is important. Oftentimes when we talk about advocacies, particularly over the last few years, that conversation of advocacy quickly shifts to getting people elected.
That's absolutely right.
And I think that's a huge misrepresentation of what advocacy is. I'm not concerned with advocating for individuals to get elected into any particular office. What I'm focused on is advocating and championing specific issues that are impacting schools. So as an example,
but is that realistic? I mean, because at the end of the day,
it is realistic.
But at the end of the day, right? We have these elections. We have these people who are driving policy in our community.
But Eric, he's saying something.
In that you're advocating for these parents, at the end, the parents walk, or you're creating this vehicle to educate them. At the end of the day, is it not realistic to think that you would then want to say to them, and so now that you are empowered,
so we would want to say to them is that because we are well informed, we are empowered, we have a choice as to whether or not we will support you as a candidate. And that's a huge difference from building up an organization of individuals and then going out and saying, I'm now going to leverage your collective buying power and kind of make you the wheels underneath this vehicle that's going to drive this individual across the finish line. Because what's happening, we've broken down this election. How many parents in this community were asked to get on board and have conversations about individuals that were most aligned with their interests and their vision for the public education system? I don't know of many.
No one talked to them.
Wait a minute. Nobody said this to the parents, you're saying?
Yeah. I'm saying no, not in the context of us, but for the individuals who selected, whoever was going to be candidates. Like how many, right?
Those
the parents
deals when they were cut down.
You understand what I'm saying?
I got you.
And even when we start breaking it down and we look at our charter schools in the community, in the city of Newark, how many of those school leaders from charter schools were part of that conversation?
No, they were told. They were told what to do.
To say what are the needs over there at your schools, and how do these individuals that we're asking you to support, how are they aligned with your overall vision for what you want to see? Because there's even two different worlds when we start talking about the charter schools that we have in the community. We talked about this a few weeks ago, how our independent charter schools are under attack.
Yeah. Clearly.
Right.
Clearly.
And I didn't hear anything from any of the candidates that are supposed to be aligned with the charter schools to specifically talk about what's happening with our independent charter schools and how they even need to be re-engineering their business models to make sure that they're able to survive and they don't get swallowed up.
If you say that we're creating education refugees and that doesn't get a community up in arms, I mean, what in the hell? What will? I mean, you're going to have 1,700 kids out on the street.
So then for the parent,
I mean,
and again, I'm talking about the parent who was a child, who had a child, how do they then begin to identify in a real way those people who are...
Listen, because I think it's... My parents, my mother and father were married very young, and they had me when they were 16 years old. Okay, and of course, socially and culturally, our communities are different.
Oh, absolutely. Big difference.
But they were two young parents. I dare say a lot of my peers' parents were young when they, conceived, right? But they had a sense of community. They had a sense of purpose. They understood that education was important for their children and community. But I'm not saying... I understand what you're saying, but I have to believe that there are some people out there listening and some people in our community that get what we're talking about.
But are those the people that...
I don't think
we
it was
were
a lot
talking
of
about
people,
flight, right? Are those the people who were looking, going, you know what? this ship is sinking too fast. So for that group that you're saying they got it, they're looking to extricate their kids from a failed school system, a failed model, put their kids in the bed. Exactly what's happening in New York.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that my parents were the only ones that I mean, everybody didn't agree with what my parents were doing at that time when they put us in private schools. I mean, there was a group of parents out there that didn't value education at that time either.
Right.
I mean, so it had to be some people, it had to be a small group or a large group that say, listen, we want the best for our kids, and if we have to put them in other schools, we will, and thank God they were able to afford it. But I don't think everybody has to come together. It has to be a group of people out there that understand what we're talking about and understand how important education is to their community and their families. So I don't think it's going to be like this big push, from everyone, but I think there are some important people out there in leadership. There are some important people that are leading our churches and leading our communities that believe education is important, and those are the people that we should be trying to talk to.
And you know what?
To talk about,
it's not a big push, because we saw in this last election with 3,800 votes, right, with 3,800 concerned parents, there could have been a seismic shift in terms of what's taking place on the Board of Education right now.
Yeah, you're right.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, we're not talking about the whole 139,000 registered voters or the parents of the 37 or 38,000 kids. We're talking 1%, 2%.
But I think Newark clearly failed their children in this last election. They probably have done it. They probably have done it over and over again.
Listen.
But I believe that the failure, the breakdown. I mean, I think the world was watching us, and I got to tell you something. They can't be impressed with us right now.
So, I've seen a number of articles that have been printed about the results from the school board election. A lot of talk about this person won, this person came out big. However, I've yet to see anything published that says how this outcome from the school board election is a victory for Newark children. Period.
Right. Well, not only have you not seen them say that it's a victory for Newark children, you haven't seen an article that really talked about how absolutely horrible it was.
Yeah.
Listen,
the low voter turnout.
Nobody
talked about that.
Why isn't that the conversation? Why is the conversation over here? Why aren't we talking about the fact that, you had, less than 5% of the electorate turn out to vote to see who was going to sit atop a $1 billion institution?
Yeah. So I wanted to...
That would drive their tax...
Right.
Yeah. That would drive their tax...
Oh, but that's another issue.
Let's talk about it.
I want to go ahead. Yeah. I want to go back to this.
That's your investment.
Yeah.
Because a quality, a high-performing school district will improve property values. And I talked about this last week in terms of what's going on in Bergenfield. And how from first quarter of 2015 to the first quarter of 2017, property values have increased by $75,000 in the community. And this in one of the direct impacts to that has been the improvements in their school district. Their school district has been recognized nationally. They have one of the top music and art programs. They're one of the most diverse schools. They also have been getting huge recognition for the performance of that their students are making when it comes down to taking AP courses. They have a robust curriculum that's there for the students, right? And again, it's not the right school system for everybody, but for those families that are in that community, not only are their kids there and they're getting a quality education, they're also getting the value add.
Let me ask you a question. You're our education guru, right? What would be the one thing, if you took over this school district right now, what would be, and I know this is really tough, but what would be the one tangible thing you would do to start to create or to engage in changing the failure of the schools?
So I would change the curriculum, and I would make this adjustment to ensure that we were providing a project-based learning initiatives for all of our students. And the reason I would is because now there's a difference. So as adults, we go into the environment, to the workspace, right? I've seen individuals who had great educational background, but they lacked experience.
Right.
And going into that environment, when you match that person up with someone who had experience, so they were able to match the practical side to it, right, to what was actually being taught in the books, those individuals had an advantage. Now when you start talking about project-based learning, it also helps to develop critical thinking skills. It also helps you to focus on team building, collaboration, communication, all of the critical skills. And I'll go back to that article, the report you sent us, Kevin, that talked about Mexico, I think it was South Africa,
yeah,
and two other countries that specifically focused on the 21st century skills that students will need to be successful in the future. And when you go down that list, they're talking about all of those skills that will be developed if students are engaged in project-based learning. Now, project-based learning helps build my foundation. Now we have it in some schools, but I don't see the wide infusion of it throughout the curriculum.
Now for the listeners who listen may not understand what
project-based learning.
Yeah.
So project-based learning is when students are given particular activities and they work together in project teams.
So it's critical analysis.
So they're doing actual hands-on work to develop the skills. So you might give the students. So I've seen in a school at one point in time, students were studying forensics, right? And they were given a printout that showed a footprint in the mud, and the students now had to utilize math and science, right, by looking at the depth of that footprint, right, how deep it was, and the size of the footprint to try to determine the height and weight of a criminal.
Wow.
Right? So it's forensic. So it's forensic, and they're doing it in a group setting. So they're working together.
So is that the Harthman's approach to education?
So
because my daughter was trained in that.
But we've seen this. It's nothing new.
I know, it's nothing new,
right? And we see this thing over and over again. We've seen Horace Mann,
right?
Who is one of those individuals, and this even goes back to the conversation.
I didn't want to take you off track, but that would be the one thing that you would do to start the re-engineering process, change
absolutely.
the curriculum.
Because what that does now, what I think project-based learning does. Let's go back to the conversation, that great debate that took place between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, right? We start talking about the talented 10th and those individuals who need to just go out here and kind of focus on on using their hands and developing the technical skills. Fast forward to the future job market and the jobs that our students are gonna be creating and the job that they're gonna fill. The talented 10th alone would not be able to survive in those jobs.
Absolutely not.
You're going to be.
They won't exist,
right?
I mean, that theory. That
theory is it won't exist. Right. But what will exist is the hybrid, the individual that has the intellectual capacity and has the ability to go in here and do the things that need to get done with their hands as well.
So the duality.
Combining those things, and you get there by implementing project-based learning.
So let me ask you another question, because this is very good.
Could I take that a step further?
Absolutely. Please do.
Now, when we talk about ways to generate additional revenue for our school district, one way that's low cost that would allow us to immediately start some project-based learning initiatives is to make sure that all of the schools in our city were following some kind of green initiative.
So sustainability.
Go green, sustainability. And you utilize the students in the school to start doing those things, implementing recycling programs, right? Figuring out ways to reduce electricity so that now you save on utility costs. So now students are getting an opportunity to be involved with the project-based learning. They can start building a portfolio of their experience at a much earlier age. And guess what the benefit to the district is? You're now able to start saving, right, in some of these critical areas where we're spending. And what does this allow us to do? That might allow us to fill that tiny gap that we experience in the budget because of some of the flat funding. Let me get us a little closer, right? You see, and this is
why this discussion is so important.
But not only that, but it's also it should have all these people scratching their heads and wondering again why there were so many people who were against him running for the Board of Education.
Well, I think it's beyond that now. They're against themselves. So let me ask another question. I mean, you clearly defined what the re-engineering of schools should look like in the future, but starting today.
Yeah.
right?
Today.
So, mastering critical analysis, being able to engage in critical analysis by using your intellect, right, to create high impact on economic growth and economic return for the school system, which prepares them to be able to work in the new workforce,
Absolutely.
the global workforce. Okay, so you matched that up pretty well, right? So let me ask you another question. Why don't you think, with all of the brain power we have in the school system, with all of the great thinkers, the people that we put in place in leadership, and I'm not even talking about the school board, they don't even matter. I'm talking about the professionals that work in those schools, or the leadership that represents the district, or the commissioner of education, or the corporate community that's always crying in public and private, where we don't have enough people that are trained to work in our companies. That's why we go to Japan. That's why we go to Germany. That's why we go to France, right? Why isn't that happening?
Well, I personally believe they're not looking at this thing on a large enough scale. So when we have us three individuals in this room, and let's say our goal is to get to that wall, right? As we move along, if that's the overall goal and mission, your personal interest for your organization can be met along that journey for us to get to the wall. And I think that's what's missing in the conversation, that individuals aren't seeing how this long-term goal of re-engineering our educational system benefits them and their organizations directly.
Well, I think they do, but I don't agree with that. I think they do, but they don't believe that we have the capacity in our communities to get there.
I'm agreeing with Rashon. I don't think that they've thought that far down the road.
Oh, I think they do. They have been talking about this for years. Why is our community of kids not being prepared to work in the global workforce? Why are we not developing human capital through our schools based on project management, what was the term you used?
Project-based learning.
Project-based learning, right? That's been a discussion that's been going on in the corporate community, because in one of the documents I read a couple of years ago, the mere fact that we are failing at the levels that we are is becoming a national security issue. Mm-hmm. Right? So, they've been talking about it. I just don't think we've been paying attention to it. That's why I asked the question.
I think they have been talking about it, but talking about it and actualizing it are two different things.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah.
Fine. All right? I'm saying I don't think it's been actualized because they haven't really looked that far down.
But I don't think that the professionals in our community, or the small business owner in our community, or the educator that deems himself as being a qualified educator, they're not on the same page about this.
No, I agree with that.
So, they don't. I don't even know they know.
If they listen to the show, they know now.
But see, this is another conversation also. So let's talk about the small business owners. How are they going to survive if they're not re-engineering their businesses?
Oh, yeah.
You understand? So they need to also understand that they have to re-engineer their businesses, because if they don't make those changes, they don't innovate, they don't transform, their businesses won't even be around 10 years from now to educate these children that we're talking about developing these critical skills for. And that's another disconnect. See, we talk about building these things. Everybody's going to be with you, and I'm taking a mayor's quote on this. It's easy to get people to stand with you to tear something down, but it's very difficult to get them to stand with you to rebuild something in place of what you tore down, right? So the people are going to be here to say tear down these programs, tear down these initiatives. They'll wean off. You'll get a couple of individuals that's going to help you build something up, but we're in such a haste to tear down and just rebuild that folks are not thinking ahead and factoring in sustainability. It doesn't matter what you build in place of it. If you can't sustain it, guess what? In the next 3 to 5 years, another group of people is going to come in here and they're going to be talking about tearing that thing down too. The sustainability is what helps us add the value to whatever it is that we're building, because people now see this as something that's going to have a long-term benefit to us, and they're not making that connection.
So now I want to stop a second again, and I got Brother Farrakhan
in
my head, right? You guys understand it, right? Because a lot of people are like, holy crap, there's a lot of stuff, right? There are a lot of people, there are a lot of pronouns being used, him, they, he. right. And they're going, how do we tie into this?
Well, we mentioned it. I mean, I asked him a very specific question, right? We talked about how do we build capacity in the parent space, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how do we create an emerging curriculum, right, to transform and re-engineer our public schools, correct? Mm-hmm. We talked about that. We've been talking about that for weeks, right? And we started to relate to how do we get there, right? What are happening in our schools that we're not there? Why isn't the corporate community, which they say that they are, why aren't we having that kind of dialogue to start that re-engineering? I don't want to tear anything down, right? That's not my...
So who's the we that should be having the conversation?
We, the community, the people, the leaders, the small business. We talked about the small business. We talked about not having entrepreneurs that advance that discussion. We talked about why parents and communities should understand why they should get value education because there's a huge return on investment, right? We talked about why, and then we started talking about why that's not happening. Right? And he started to address some of that. So I asked him a very specific question about, if you were in charge of our school system, what would you do? And what you said was absolutely...
I think it was brilliant.
Brilliant.
It was brilliant.
Because that's where we are. If you're really studying this issue and you're not emotionalizing it, every parent understands that. Because right now, we send our kids to all of these liberal colleges, and they are wonderful. They come home, our kids come home, they can't get jobs. Because they're not being trained for the 21st century workforce. They're being trained to read and write, to understand the important literature, to maybe do some critical thought, stuff. But they're not really trained to do the critical work that's going to be driving our new economy. So right then and there, if I have a failed school, if I walk into a public school right now, in a charter school right now, I dare say that they're not preparing their kids based on your theology, right, or your methodology. They're not. Even charter schools.
So I would say this,
and that's not by giving them a computer and having them do. That
doesn't help. So I personally believe within the next 10 years there will be a group of individuals who will be sitting around scratching their heads saying, how do we improve our economy overall? That's going to be a question. Right, and that question is then going to cause individuals to start thinking about how they can be creative and innovative in creating a new industry, one that's not here, one that doesn't exist. And these conversations are happening now. So let's talk about the tech boom, right? What has social media done for the economy? How many millionaires have been created off of the infusion of technology that we've seen in our community? Right. You have a billionaire who was created from a social media platform, right? And what that was an individual being innovative and creating.
But not only did he disrupted.
Right.
He was engaged in disruption. Right. He disrupted the system, just like Airbnb disrupted the system, just like Uber disrupted the system, just like Tesla disrupted the system. But it gets back to another point. They're already having that conversation. But how are we training our kids to understand that this new emerging economy of information-based technology is going to drive the future for our local economy, right? Forget our national and regional economy, but our local economy, right? So in those schools, are we taking those kids and building, aggressive entrepreneurs in the tech marketplace that's going to drive huge returns for our community?
So I'm going to say no.
Of course you're going to say no.
No, it's not. And let's go into that entrepreneur piece. You want to know if that's happening? When your kids come home from school, ask them if they're being taught about financial management and entrepreneurship. If the answer to that is no, then we're not even close. Now, when we go back to this whole the empowerment piece, and I heard you guys talking about the in that report yesterday about the Tale of Two Cities. The mayor's commitment of creating
20,000 jobs by 2020.
All right, so how are we going to create those jobs if we're not talking about entrepreneurship, developing critical thinking skills, the ability for our students to be innovative, and the ability for our students to transform the things that already exist or even go out and create new things? That has to be a
the equation.
Part of the conversation.
First of all, the entrepreneurialism comes in so many different forms, right? We know that. So entrepreneurialism is just not opening up a store and paying rent and selling products.
Absolutely
because
not.
social media and the technology marketplace has changed all of that. But to be an entrepreneur, right, you have to use your brain to be able to produce value for another individual or groups of individuals. So when you use the word entrepreneurialism or you use the word entrepreneur, if you say you're going to create 20,000 jobs, but to not factor in education and re-engineering education, and it's going to take us, instead of like 10 years, it's going to take us 50 years. But if we start here in school A and start that trajectory into the future, we would then have huge returns, because we would have changed the culture and and our consciousness of what we see education is, right? And that's not what's happening. So when you make these huge declarations without understanding what that long-term formula is, it is doomed to fail. So that's why these conversations we're having are so critical. Now, you can turn on NPR, you can turn on Morning Joe, you can turn on Charlie Rose, you can turn on all of the news outlets, right? You could turn on Channel 1. They're not having these very intricate 2-hour conversations about rebranding and redefining an equation that impacts long-term growth through education, right, and entrepreneurialism. We stand up in front of our people and we say, you know, we're going to do this, but when we really go behind that closed doors, we're not sending a man to the moon. Before they sent that man to the moon, this is the 100 years of John F. Kennedy, before they sent that man to the moon, they had scientists working on that in a competitive way, working all of these formulas out to see if we can accomplish what the Russians had accomplished.
So,
and we need scientists. We need institutional scientists that can get in a room and break down what that formula is.
And they don't exist here right now. And so,
I hate to do that,
but again, all of, because I keep having Farrakhan in my head, all of what you said simply means what we talked about yesterday, right? These key performance indicators. So when you look and you recognize, and the analogy I gave yesterday was, if I'm telling you I'm baking a cake, but I ain't got no flour, no sugar, no butter, none of that stuff, guess what? I'm not baking a cake. So these people will tell you that they're doing these things, but if you don't see the ingredients, they're not doing it.
Look, we're being
they're
very
just not doing it. Look, and I'm just trying to give it to them in layman's
terms. What we're trying to do too, and I want to be clear, we're being very proactive about this discussion. This has been a very proactive discussion about education and what ownership of education means, what value of education means, what we need to do to prepare our kids for the 21st century, really prepare them for the 21st century. That we really might have to tear something down and re-engineer it, but do it in stages where we see the growth. We can measure the growth, the metrics. We can see it in real time. And that will eliminate the bull conversation. You know, charter versus this, or why this is not happening, and we got to stand against the system. We have no time for that. Right? So this kind of conversation even helps me to form a better dialogue about who, and when I talk to parents or educational leaders about what's real. You know, because I dare say a lot of our educational leaders are not at this level.
I agree. So here's a question I would ask you, Rashon. For the parents who have listened to the hour and 50 minutes of the show, so waking up tomorrow, what would they do?
Well,
because you have people who literally will say, okay, what do I do? What do I do right now? What do I do?
I think the first thing you should do when you go, if you haven't already been involved with your parent organization at your school, when you go to take your kid to school tomorrow, you should be inquiring about that. I'm serious, right?
That's good.
I just had a parent-teacher conference.
Can you put that up on Facebook so you can give a list of things that they should be concerned with?
We had a parent-teacher conference last week, and I would say if you are not aware of the curriculum that's being used to educate your child, you should ask that question of the leadership at your school. And you'll see there might be standards listed in the curriculum, and they should also list in every curriculum the learning outcomes for the students. And if you don't see anything in there that mentions project-based learning, you should be asking that critical question of those individuals at the school. Why don't we have more project-based learning activities or initiatives to help our children master, because that's the terminology that's used to master these skills that you all are teaching our children. And now, once you start asking questions like that, they're going to look at you differently as a parent. They're no longer going to look at you as, oh, Mr. or Mrs. Williams that just comes in and pick. They're going to see you in a different light when you start asking those questions, because now you're having questions that are driving at the heart of accountability.
Can we do the listener a favor? Can you put a list of questions?
Absolutely.
And can we put a list of books for our parents to read?
No, absolutely.
Can we do that? Can we do that before the next show? Can you give a list of questions and a list of books? And I'll go look in my library to see if I have some books that will give them a better understanding of what they should be doing and how they should be helping their child and what kind of dialogue they should be having, not just with the individual running the school, but other parents about what we need to be doing. This is the kind of discussion that we should be having, as opposed to going in and marching up and down the street to vote for somebody.
Yeah. And I would add,
I really want to. If you can do that, I would really appreciate
something that I learned also. I would say my school's son, they have like a coffee chat when they invited the parents to come in, each grade, and the literacy coach were there to talk to us parents for grades kindergarten through grades 5, to talk to us about the importance of reading out loud to our children. So we watched a 9-minute TED Talk video. So for those of you who aren't familiar with TED Talk, there are individuals who get on this platform nationally and they just kind of talk about an issue. And that issue, there was a teacher who talked about the importance of reading out loud to our children. And I was like, my son, he's a pretty good reader. I come in sometimes and I read to the class. And I was like, you know what? That opened up my mind, because what I found in that conversation was that in order for children who are that young to really think critically about what happens in a story, it helps when they see individuals reading to them or kind of like being animated about what's going on in the book. So it helps bring those things to life for them. So now when you say, little such and such was running as fast as he could in the book, if we're reading that to our children and we're like, he was running as fast as he could, and now the child is envisioning that in their mind, seeing somebody running and they're out of breath because they're running as fast as they can. And now when you then start to break this thing down to them and say, well, what did you get out of that story? They can come now and break this thing down a little more critically.
You ever think about writing? You ever think about writing I call it the fourth dimensional learning paradigm? Like, because we have social media and we have technology, we have information. You ever think about writing that? You ever think about, like how to, the shift that's occurring and how education is evolving? And I call it the fourth dimension, or the fourth dimension paradigm of education. You should think about that. Because we do have a fourth dimension. Remember, we were trained to use our third eye, right? Which, of course, is much more spiritual. But because of technology, I think we have to start to look at the fourth dimensional, because it gives us another access to what things are, from a spiritual or from a social or from a community perspective. That's something you should think about. You have the talent to do that. You're the education professional. I'm just a person that's engaged in business. I understand how innovation and these things are important for my business, so I stay in that space so I can understand how to create product for my client, to understand how we bring value for them, to them, right? So you should think about that. And I want to say on the radio, I'm very proud he can announce it on his own, but Rashon is going to be a recurring writer for Tap Into on education. And that's going to be great. And you should talk about that if possible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So
I love talking to you about this stuff.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with both of you gentlemen in this capacity. We spend a lot of time discussing how we can empower our community and take ownership of the media space. So, moving forward, I will be featuring one monthly op editorial that will be posted on Tap Into. And, I'm hopeful that from these op editorials that it will provide great context that meets the readers and the communities where they are, and brings light to some of the critical issues that we've been talking about here on the show. And I want to bring those things full circle, tied into the economic impact that we have on our communities and the redevelopment. Oftentimes we talk about the redevelopment of communities. That means building new buildings, and when we start talking about redevelopment, it also includes that conversation about re-engineering our educational system, raising the level of awareness amongst our parents, then empowering them so that they can be strong out here in this space too. So I'm very excited about it. And there was one thing, if I could, before we, and I'll be very quick. So I wanted to go back to the point about the charter schools taking money from the traditional public schools. I think that one way to tie in this conversation about empowering parents is understanding that, parents, you are consumers. You're clients in the educational space, because what happens is the state gives a school district per pupil funding for your child. That means that school district, whether it's traditional public school, whether it's a charter school, they're being paid to educate your child, right? They're being paid to give you a service, and at the end of the day, you should be satisfied with what they're providing to you. So I get the conversation of, money coming into the traditional public school, and then they write a check to the charter school because the money is supposed to follow the students. That idea is so important, because that's what I think some board members have missed over the last few years. Anytime you're writing a check to somebody, because now you're transferring that responsibility of providing that educational service, right? Mm-hmm. So, Eric, you no longer have to provide the service because you wrote the check to Kevin. Kevin's now responsible for providing that service. But at the end of the day, your foot should be on his neck to make sure that he's being held accountable for what he's supposed to deliver. So if we look at that, the board paying the charter school, the board has to be engaged with what's happening with our charter schools, because the responsibility of providing that child with a thorough and efficient education was transferred from your entity to this other entity once that student got enrolled there. So you still have a stake in it.
Very well put.
Because you're sending the funds over to the school.
Very well put. I don't even think people see it that way. That's very well put.
With the next 10 seconds, I want to remind people there's a board meeting tonight, reorganization
meeting, and from what I'm hearing, that Marquise Lewis is supposed to be the next president.
We'll see. But I will say that we will have our first parent at that board meeting broadcasting Facebook Live. So if you can't make it, make sure you visit my page at 6 o'clock. We will be broadcasting it, and you can tune in and weigh in there. But for now, this is Eric,
Kevin,
and this is Rashon,
and we're out.
Peace.
This has been the Eric Dawson Radio Show.
It's not just about Eric's opinion. It's about understanding what's really going on.
Radio 94.3. Reggae, dance hall, soca, hip hop and R&B, African,